Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento. And for this very special episode 800, we are bringing on an incredible guest. She is someone who, like me, is a fellow native Massachusetts person. She's now out west in the great state of Utah. And I think in so many ways, today's guest really embodies the entrepreneurial spirit. Not only did she grow up with an entrepreneurial dad, but she is really one of those people who just says, you know what? If I have an idea, I'm going to go chase after it. If I believe I can help people, I'm going to go do exactly that. So let me tell you about today's guest. Her name is Amanda Brem. Amanda is the founder of the Brem Method. She's a former D1 athlete and personal trainer that, after scoring in the 97th percentile on her MCATs, realized she didn't actually want to go to medical school. Instead, she wanted to teach others while making med school more accessible to underserved students and those who struggle with test taking. Since then, she has become a YouTuber. She's serving people all over the world for how to pass the MCAT and get into medical school. She's so passionate about all things service, as well as business, as well as entrepreneurship. We talked off air about how much work goes behind all of this, and we're going to hear it firsthand from her today. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Amanda Brem. All right, Amanda, I'm so excited that you're here with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here as well.
Heck yes. I know you're going to bring the energy and so many insights for us here today. But first things first, take us beyond that bio. I tooted your horn just a little bit, but I want to hear your version of the story. How the heck did you get here?
Yeah, I always like to start this story by saying that I got here through failure, because I think I did not intend to be an entrepreneur. Even though I had a lot of background in it and I had started a few things when I was younger, I really considered myself to be to school. I want to eventually get a graduate degree and serve people in that way. So as I was going through that journey and had some failures, I applied to 22 medical schools and didn't get a single interview. And when I had that experience, I really realized, I was like, you know what? I could do this. I could apply again. But the whole reason I was going to medical school is I really wanted to teach science and medicine. I love teaching. It's my passion and my journey. And I realized that I could probably teach the things I loved without having to spend 4 years doing a degree and spending thousands of dollars. So I just decided to teach. And I'd always intended to go back to school. I was like, I'm just going to do this for fun, to give myself a little break, kind of recover from the PTSD of that failure and do things I loved, which is helping people do really cool things with their career in life. And that just steamrolled into a full business. And it took me 2 years, I think, to really accept that I was an entrepreneur, accept that I was a business owner and not just a teacher. So that has been a big journey for me moving forward.
Yeah, I love that overview, Amanda. And there's so much. I feel like a theme of our conversation today, we don't know where it's going to take us, but I know that a theme is going to be really how hard this stuff is and how much goes behind it. Because I love hearing you talk about, teaching was your priority, but really there was a light bulb that switched that said, wait, but I also need to treat this like a business. Talk to us about that bridge that you had to cross, because a lot of people, it's the very nature of this show, entrepreneur to entrepreneurs. We don't become business owners until we start acting like business owners, taking action like business owners. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, I think I had a lot of resistance early on to the idea of running a business. And in my head, I was like, okay, I've been in this academic world. I want to serve people. And the idea of making a profitable business felt dissonant to that at first, where I was like, oh, I hate charging people money. I hate asking for those things. And then I realized that in order to teach the way I wanted to teach, in order to provide the service that I wanted to provide, that I could provide, I needed to be a business owner first, because I can't reach people. I can't find people if they don't know who I am, if they don't feel safe and trusted in that community that I'm building. And the only way to do that, at least if I wanted to be separate from what was already there in the industry, was to create my own business. So that was really the moment for me where I was like, actually being an entrepreneur is service, is helping people, because I'm able to then create a space that's not in the industry of test prep that actually can help students in the way that I know they need to be helped. So that was the big light bulb for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think I've ever actually asked a guest this in public, but it's funny because I feel like a lot of listeners, this is like the one thing that I always hear from entrepreneurs. They always worry about giving away too much. And Amanda, you love educating people. And we're going to talk a lot about your YouTube channel here today. Listeners, that link's going to be down below in the show notes. But I love you genuinely, you can't help yourself, Amanda. You love giving people value. And along those lines, I'm sure that you've weaved through those crossroads of how much is giving out too much, which I don't believe there's an answer to that, versus how do I actually have that lead to me growing a business, which involves revenue. What's your attitude towards that? And I'm super curious to hear if that attitude towards that free value on YouTube, for example, has changed over time.
Yeah. And I think that's something, I imagine that's something that comes up for a lot of service-based and product-based. You know, it's like, what is too much to give away? For me personally, as a service-based education company, I learned pretty early on, I could never give away too much. Like there is always more that my students want from me. Like even when I work with them one-on-one for 4 months, they want another month. So what I learned is there's really not a limit to what I can give away, because what I'm showing is value, right? And so if I can provide value with my free resources with YouTube, like what on earth am I giving for my paid students? I think is the impression that I give to my future students who are watching me on YouTube and says, wow, if she's giving away this, what is she providing in a paid course and a paid resource? So I have found that I don't have a limit, at least as of yet. That answer might change, but as of right now, I don't think there is too much to give away as long as you're providing more value in your services.
Yes, I so agree with that, Amanda. And I love the way that you phrase that, which is there is no limit. There's no such thing as giving away too much for free. Look at this. We're 800 episodes into this show since 2016, and people are still going out there and buying either my products or other people's products, because what we're buying is really the transformation. Information is one thing, but having that head next to you who has done it before, you've placed in the 97th percentile when taking your MCATs, that's incredible. And that's something that can't be replaced simply through free content. Content is not the value. It's really what people do with it. So I love that perspective. Take us back to that first paid client, because I feel like that's always an incredible story, because that's the day, Amanda, I would argue that you went from entrepreneur to entrepreneur, because you got over the imposter syndrome, the self-doubt, all the things that we all constantly face. And you said, there's value here and I can help people.
Yeah, so this is a funny story because I had worked for Kaplan, who's technically one of my competitors, and I was one of their teachers, and kind of low level. And I was like, this is nice, but honestly, there was a lot of teachers in Boston working for that company at the time, and I wasn't getting as many classes as I wanted. There were limits on it. And I was like, I'd love to teach more. So I was playing with the idea of going out on my own. I also like the idea of being able to create my own curriculum and do my own thing. And as I was just playing with that idea, I was teaching a couple classes at night. I went out to dinner with one of my best friends and her colleagues. And she was in psychology world. So she had a lot of friends in the clinical healthcare space. And so we went out to dinner. And I was sitting across from these two women I'd never met before. And one of them was talking about how she really wanted to go back to medical school. And she was a nurse and she was really scared of the MCAT. And I just casually was like, I teach the MCAT. And I just pitched it in that moment in the dinner party. And I was like, I could tutor you. And she's like, that's great. Let's exchange numbers. And she was my very first client. And we still keep in touch. Years later, she's finishing up her medical. She's in her residency now. So it's been like 6 years since then. And it was a really cool moment.
Yeah, that's an incredible story, Amanda. And I think it really shows that it really just comes down to, I have something that I can do that helps other people and they value that result. And I would imagine that, well, actually, I'm going to back up a little bit because I want to call out what I know a lot of listeners are thinking. And they're just like, well, Amanda, you're really good at teaching this stuff. But I would imagine that your stuff has changed along the way. So here we are talking about the Brem Method. It sounds like you've got some age-old, tried, proven method, but you weren't born with that method. Talk to us about the evolution of the way that you serve people.
Yeah. And a lot of that came from realizing how much I needed to protect my energy. And I think any founder of a company or a service-based business especially really understands that when you're meeting with people one-on-one, there's a limit to your energy. And what I realized is I needed to have a more systematic process of getting students to their goal. Like, it's great to just meet and hang out and talk about their challenge areas, but really what they needed was a plan. And what I needed was a plan so that I could free up my mental energy to really focus on what they needed and not be thinking, what should I teach them next? So I created a plan, and this actually came from my previous life. I was a personal trainer and a fitness coach and an athletic coach in my early 20s out in California. And I had built training plans, right? If someone is trying to do a marathon or lose 20 pounds, you don't just go into the gym and, futz around. You have to figure out what's a plan that's going to get me to my goals. And a good trainer will build that plan out for you, whether it takes weeks or months or years. And so one of the things I became really good at when I was a trainer was coming up with that training plan and really kind of assessing and figuring out, okay, are we moving in the right direction? What changes do we need to make? So I essentially built training plans for my tutoring students for the MCAT, where I took all the knowledge I had from my physical training and put it towards mental training. And they loved it. And we saw so much progress, and they got their results because they could actually see what they were doing, and they felt more confident in what we were trying to accomplish. So that was the seed of the Brem Method. And since then, I've really developed the plan, the progress, and that kind of treating students like mental athletes where they're trying to do a big performance. And there's a lot of pieces that we need to train, just like an NBA player needs to train, 3 points, at the basket, free throws, but also the stress of a big game, right? So we do all of that work in the Brem Method.
Yeah, Amanda, I'll tell you what, there's two things that really stand out, even in a very short conversation with you. One of which is you love teaching, of course, and that's so deeply embedded in your entire backstory. But two is that you really do geek out on teaching methodology, and that's why you're able to help people get these results. I would actually argue for every single one of you listeners that's tuning in, teaching is a core part of what all of us do. When I hear Amanda talk about these things, what I'm really hearing is, holy cow, this would benefit people from structuring a sales presentation. How can we teach people how we can actually deeply serve them? With that in mind, Amanda, you are far deeper into the world of teaching methodology than most people. Talk to us about how you begin to structure those, because you just said one of my favorite words in the world, like 10 times in that last answer, which is plan. How do you even begin to formulate a plan that leads to that transformation that you want to deliver?
Yeah, and I think it's kind of meta because I do this for my students, but then I also do this for the Brem Method, like as in my business, where I do what we call macro planning first. And I sit down with a student, or I sit down with a group of students, or I sit down with me and my husband who run the Brem Method, and we say, okay, where do we want to be a year from now, 6 months from now? For students, they kind of pick, okay, when do we want to take your exam? And let's look at that endpoint, and then let's work backwards on a macro level to say, what are the pieces that will get me to that goal? For a lot of students, that's how many hours of study, right? For the Brem Method, that's how many YouTube videos do I want to put out? And so we build that out, and then we say, okay, we have our big picture goal of how many hours to study. Now let's break that up and make sure it's reasonable, make sure it fits into our schedule, make sure that we can actually accomplish that goal, or we need to adjust the timeline. Once we have that figured out, then we dive into what happens in those hours. What are we filming on a YouTube video? What are they studying in those hours? And we do that by figuring out what are the pain points? What are the weakest parts of where we're at right now? What's keeping us from our goals that we can then, address and hit head on in those hours and actually make us strength. So looking for not just how many hours, but also what will actually provide that progress, that change, right? Someone's trying to lose 10 pounds, is it the biggest goal? Is that to do some bench press, or should we be getting on the treadmill? So it's just asking what will actually make a difference and what should go into those hours. And then of course, the last piece is how are we assessing our progress? For me, it's always every month. Every month is assessment. We check in, we try to have some numbers, we try to have some unbiased variables to make sure we're moving in that direction.
Yeah, listeners, we always say success leaves clues. You're hearing Amanda's thought process in real time here about the power of that reverse engineering, starting with where the heck do I want to go? Rather than just throwing a million things on your to-do list, let's make sure that those things actually make sense. And Amanda, to go even one step beyond that, what I'm really hearing from you is that part of the reverse engineering is you thinking about your customers, your clients, the people that you serve. When you bring up pain points, there's no mistake to the types of content that you're publishing on YouTube. All of that is well thought out. Talk to us about how you've deepened that understanding. Now, obviously, you've been working with people for a while, so having those real life examples is part of it. But I'm dying to know part of that research that goes into formulating your content, how you shape your service, how you shape your actual teaching methodology. Lay that stuff on us.
Yeah. So I will say that I started truly just working one-on-one. And like I said, I wasn't even trying to build a business. I was just trying to teach. But as I did that, I couldn't help but create some systems. So my students would fill out a form every week with what were their biggest questions, what were their biggest worries, where were they confused, so that we would go into the tutoring session with a plan. I've had those forms for the last 5 years. So what we've done now that I'm just starting to build my YouTube channel this year, because we are trying to make more of an effort to reach more students so that we can provide more courses to them. Before, I didn't even have a course to provide. So, we had to kind of build that first. So now what we're doing is we're saying, okay, how can we reach students who have never heard of the Brem Method and provide them immediately with value? And what I did is I looked back at all of those years of forms and aggregated what are the questions that come up over and over and over with every student. And I wanted to make those videos first. I want to provide those resources first. So we built resources, we built mini courses, and we built YouTube videos around the top 10 biggest questions that students always come in and ask. I am a scientist at heart as well. So I'm a big believer in looking for data, not just assuming what my students want, but actually getting their questions answered, and asking them, what do you need? What do you want? And that's available on the internet, but I also had a wealth of information from my previous students.
Yeah, I love those insights. You say that you're a scientist. Part of me wonders also how much of your job is also that of a psychiatrist, because I know that when we're delivering any transformation through service-based businesses, Amanda, how much of what you work through with your clients is on that mental component?
Yeah, it's so big that 2 years ago, I built something called mental fitness. So what I say now is my job is one part teaching them science, one part, educator, one part coach, which is the planning side, and one part mentor, therapist, whatever you want to call it. And that is what I call mental fitness, which is dealing with the anxieties and the stresses that come up. My students are pre-meds. They are high performers. They're trying to do a really, really hard thing, which is get into medical school. And their education hasn't been easy to get there. So a lot of them have anxieties and imposter syndrome and nerves, and doing a big test that, your whole career relies on, super scary, right? So I do a lot of mental fitness work. And a lot of that actually came from sports psychology, because we've done so much research in the US on how to, make a clutch player instead of a choke player. And that research really comes out in sports because there's a lot of money in sports. And I've just adopted all of that sports psychology into supporting my students and also just listening to them. I think having somebody who understands what they're going through and says, yep, it's hard, it's scary, and you can do it. That's what they're looking for 90% of the time.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm glad that you brought sports. Obviously, that's something that you and I have in common and we totally geek out about. I also think it makes you so uniquely positioned to talk about the mental side of anything, because D1 athlete, personal trainer, now you work in the medical world, and layered on top of all that, you're also an entrepreneur. Every single one of those pursuits involves a lot of mental barriers. And I love that you pointed out that's one of those 3 core pillars. I feel that way about business too, which is why ever since 2016, we've always had episodes specifically about mindset. That's going to limit us. Amanda, with your entrepreneurial hat on, what are some of those mindset barriers that either you've helped people work through in other realms of your background that I just mentioned, or that you as an entrepreneur, you still are so cognizant of, and you say, no, that's that demon right there, and I need to continue fighting those demons?
Yes. So I'm going to talk about myself for this answer here, because I'm scared all the time, is what I will say. Running my own business, we own a house, we have bills to pay, and my husband, who also ran a coaching business and then has since started to move over to help with the Brem Method, and so we can put both brains on. He did a coaching business for people in tech and working through some of those mental barriers. So I'm very lucky that I have like an in-house coach to help me with this. And one of the things we talk about all the time together is that this is terrifying. It is. There's no getting around the fact that running your own business, the trade-off for the freedom and getting to do what you want is the fact that it's super risky and super scary. And there's no getting around that piece. So we've been doing a lot of work around do it scared, right? Do it even though you're scared. If it's scary, it's probably actually going to be important and helpful and valuable for us. So like YouTube was super scary a couple months ago for me. I did not like filming myself. It was very uncomfortable. And I was like, I had to go through that mental process of that's good. That's a good thing that I'm scared. That means I'm pushing the limit of my comfort zone and ultimately going to be making myself a better entrepreneur, a better business owner, and a better coach for my students. So I do that work all the time. And I think just leaning into the fear and just being like, this is a normal part of being an entrepreneur, is that every couple of days I get super scared and I do it anyway.
Yeah, Amanda, I really enjoy that because one analogy that I've always leaned on in life and in business is, I'm going to pull on your fitness background, is that concept of the weights don't change, we do. And so is it always scary to be on camera and create all this content? Listeners know that we are one take wonders here on this show. The conversation you and I are having is what's going out straight to the public. And so all of these things are scary. For me, less so, because I've done 800 reps of these. And so the more that we lean into these things, the more that we do these things, the quote unquote easier they become. And it really reminds me, I love the analogy. I'm a big fan of analogies in general. I love the analogy of test taking, because you've already said it here in our conversation today that for people who are signing up to take the MCATs, my sister, for example, is a veterinarian. I've seen it firsthand. This one test dictates so much of what they've been working to for decades, Amanda. That is not a small thing. And as entrepreneurs, we hype up so many of these tests in our own minds. Oh, the first time we're going to pitch a big potential client, the first time we're going to say a price in front of somebody else. That was a big one for me. Talk to us about the attitude towards these tests, whether it's a literal test like the MCAT or a test that we as entrepreneurs are going to face. What's the healthy mindset? Because part of me wants to respect it as a big thing that it is, but then part of me also wants to act like this is normal.
Yeah, I think there is a benefit to being like, this is a big deal, right? Like one of the things that I'm working towards is I have a big belief that institutions that are pre-medical institutions should be providing MCAT prep as a part of their program. And so one of the things I'm trying to do is work with institutions to provide my services through the institution. The students get that as a part of their program instead of having to find me separately and pay extra money for me. And so pitching that to a school, to a big institution is super scary and feels like if I don't do this, I've failed, right? It's a big moment to have that conversation, with the representative of the school. And what I call, and this is, I'm going to get a little sciencey. I hope that's okay. This is called the Yerkes-Dodson curve of eustress versus distress, where you want to have some level of arousal, some level of kind of adrenaline and up, because then you focus more, you're more on point. But if you go a little too far, you tip that scale, now we're into distress and anxiety. And so finding that sweet spot of, yes, it's important. Yes, I care. So I'm going to put my best effort in here and be super focused, but it's not tipping over into the anxiety. Now I'm freezing up and actually stumbling over my words and not having a good experience. And that point, I think, is different for everyone. For me, hyping myself up really helps. I have a tendency to fall onto the apathy side of that scale, where I'm like, oh, nothing matters anyway. So I have to hype myself up a little bit more. A lot of my students, they're right on the edge of that anxiety anyway, and we need to calm down and say, it's okay. I'm not going to die if I don't do well in the MCAT. It's a big deal, and sure, it's a failure, but I'm not going to die. And I think that's a really useful mentality to be part of.
Yeah, I love those insights. It sounds like you and I are very similar. And I think a sports background is we're able to hype ourselves up for those occasions. For me, there's like a few go-to songs that if I put those songs on, I am in game mode. My game face is on. But you're right. On the flip side, so many people need to realize slow everything down. It's something we see in the world of sports. Every time I watch Roger Federer play tennis, I'm just like, man, this guy creates time and space. And it's an incredible attribute. Amanda, along those lines, just like in sports, so many things that we do take us out of that comfort zone. And you and I said it off air, they're hard. People don't realize all the things that go into it. It's why I've always loved that picture of the iceberg where people see, 10% of it above the water, but the 90% below is what's really mattering. I know that that's true for you as an entrepreneur when it comes to YouTube. I know it's true for your students when it comes to test taking. Talk to us about some of those waters that you've navigated with regards to all the work that goes on behind the scenes, and shed some light on it for the listeners who may not be in the weeds of it just yet and are still out there idealizing, oh, starting a business must be fun and easy.
Yeah, well, I think, I don't know if I hope people feel like, there is work that's involved in starting a business. I think the two pieces I would say that I pay a lot of attention to are my craft needs to drive the business, not the other way around. So it's great to sell things, but if I don't have any quality things to sell, then I am ultimately not serving my clientele, my students. So making sure that I am always progressing my skills as an instructor, that I'm always on the cutting edge of what's happening in the pre-med world. I go to conferences, I have conversations with admissions officers and people who are at the AMC who makes the MCAT, and I make sure that I'm always providing value by being that subject matter expert. And that takes time to really kind of continue to build my craft. And it needs to kind of like be separate from building the business. And then the other piece is the building of the business, right? Which is, when is it the right time? I've hired my first employee last year, which was a big step for me because I realized that I was taking more time doing administrative work, updating the website, writing my emails, than I was actually coaching and teaching. And so I realized at that point, I needed to take the risk, hire an employee so that I could free myself up to do the things I do best. So those kind of decisions, I think, are a lot of what's in that waters, that deeper part of the iceberg of when is it the right time to produce new things? When is it the right time to hire new people? And can I like thread the needle of that timeline so that I'm always providing value? I'm, maintaining my profit levels and able to like still live and do the things I like to do.
Yeah, which I think also raises an important point, Amanda, that I don't think we talk about enough in the world of entrepreneurship, and that is being a practitioner versus being a business owner. Because the reality is, you're right, mastering your craft is incredibly important no matter what your business type is. But if you simply wanted to be a practitioner, you would go work for a Kaplan, for example. But I think the important thing is you also are committed. I'm going to toot your horn here because you obviously are amazing at teaching. But what I really respect about your business is you also take the business side extremely seriously. And I always make the argument that any entrepreneur has an obligation. It is a moral obligation to get good at marketing, because if we can help people, we better be good at getting that thing in front of people. Talk to us about how you balance that, because you do wear these multiple hats, and these are only 2 of a million hats that you wear. Where does that attitude and obligation towards being a good marketer come in?
Yeah. So I think part of that is realizing that I'm not going to say I'm not good at it because I have a growth mindset, right? But I didn't have a lot of knowledge about marketing. I'm great at sales because I think I'm passionate about what I do and I believe in what I do for work. So when I meet with someone and I'm like, hey, you should work with me, I think that comes off really authentic because I truly believe that this will help. So sales has never been an issue. But yeah, marketing, getting in front of people who don't know me, I didn't know much about it, and I wasn't very good at it when I tried it out. I tried a few things, so they were bullets that just went nowhere. So what I've done is I've really reached out. This is one of the reasons my husband's now working on the Brem Method with me. Is he has much more of a background in marketing and understands marketing a lot more and enjoys it. And I've read a lot of books and I've watched a lot of podcasts and videos on, the importance of marketing and how that kind of plays into your business model and design. And I've been going to a lot of conferences to try to just get my face in front of people, because I love talking about the Brem Method, as you can tell. And the more I talk it up, the better the marketing goes. So that is kind of my philosophy around marketing, is just talk it up to everyone. Like if I'm meeting someone in a coffee shop, you bet they know about the Brem Method by the end of that conversation. So that is the piece that I've leaned into, is sharing what I do and being really excited to share what I do instead of hiding it. And then leaning on people who are more advanced in their knowledge or more educated on marketing to help me out on the weak areas that I don't know how to do.
Yes, I just want to call that out for listeners right there. I think that is such a key takeaway here that you shared with us, Amanda, is talk about it. Unabashedly talk about it. You have a giant smile on your face every time you talk about the Brem Method. Listeners, you don't have to do it in a salesy way. All these things that people tell you about an elevator pitch and being salesy and those sales analogies of ABC, always be closing. Amanda is out there, and I think it's such an inspiration for all of us in our own businesses. Just share with people, here's what I do. And here's the people that it benefits. And here's how it's helped me personally before I even got to this point. So I think there's so much power in that, Amanda. Along those lines, I really like part of our content here in 2024. So many guests have been talking about executive time and having that room for that more visionary thinking. And Amanda, I want to argue, and I don't know you well enough to know this for sure, but it seems to me like you are a visionary thinker. You don't just think about today, you're thinking about tomorrow. You've already shared with us, for example, your plans of getting in at the institutional level. How far into the future does your brain, do your eyes look? How much of that is factored into your daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly workflow versus, hey, here's what I'm focusing on right now. Let's grow this YouTube channel. Let's make that happen. I want to hear that balance.
Yeah. So I will say that I adopt a set it and forget it philosophy around big goals, which is, okay, at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of 2024, I sat down with my team. I have a small team, but they're super supportive of me. And we talked through, okay, where do I want to go that's still in alignment with my values? And we haven't talked about values, but I am a big believer in core values, both on a business level and a personal level. I make all of my students do a core values exercise to figure out what are the 3 things that's most valuable to them. And so we have Brem Method values, and we make sure that our goals that we've come up with for 2024 or beyond still align with those values. You know, are we still going in that direction where we feel authentic and we feel like we're living into the values that we've created for this company? And once we do that, so one of the values was making sure that students had access to a more empathetic, compassionate test prep than is out there in the industry. And the issue is that people didn't know about us, right? We were like, okay, the challenge here is we can't get to that goal if people don't know who we are. So our goal for 2024 really needs to be to expand our brand in terms of awareness and have more students know who we are so they can choose to come to us if this is something that they're seeking. And so we worked with that goal. We decided that YouTube was the place to go for that because education is great on YouTube. And then we set goals for how many YouTube videos we wanted to create. 1 to 2 a week, 2 on good weeks, 1 on rough weeks. So that way we have an emergency plan where we're still putting out content, but then we have an ideal plan when things are going well and when I have more time. And then now that we have that plan, I don't think about that goal. Our goal, we have a goal for how many subscribers we want and how many new newsletter subscribers we want, and how many people are filling our courses. But I try not to think about those numbers. I try to just think about the actions I'm taking until we get to that next assessment point, which will be at the end of Q1.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, listeners, I hope that you are also listening deeply to everything Amanda's sharing with us. There's so much wisdom in this. Amanda, I love how you just talked about your ideal plan, but also having that emergency plan. It's something I learned long ago about being a podcaster, a 5-day-a-week podcast. We need to have episodes in the bank at all times. And so the reality is, on a weekly basis, I'm not always going to. If I get sick one week, it's really hard to record episodes. So I need to have those in the bank. So I love that transparency there. I want to give you a platform for a little bit because I know how values driven you are. And I would argue most newer entrepreneurs don't set aside that intentional time and thinking to be values driven. And they say values. I mean, my core values right now, my core value is just to get a few clients. Talk to us about the importance of it. Because for me, it's really clear that it drives your actions as well. Accessibility being a core value, boom. YouTube is a natural way to meet that value. Talk to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I will admit I borrowed heavily about core values. This is not my idea. Brene Brown talks about it in her book Dare to Lead, which is where I got it. B2.0, which is another amazing entrepreneurship book, talks about values as well. So I borrowed this from the greats. But what I will say is I took my personal values. So I'll just share. My personal values are wisdom and wholeheartedness. So I wouldn't say that I am wise, but I aspire to make decisions and act in a way that leans towards wisdom. And wholeheartedness for me just means I fully believe in everything I'm doing, saying, and acting, right? That I can put my whole self behind it. And so that ties into the Brem Method values of we have trust is our big one, where we want to be a company that students trust and they know that we've got them. We know that we're providing them with true value. Accountability. So, and again, that's accountability and accessibility of like, we're accountable to our students and wanting to make sure that they know that we are there for them and not the other way around. They're not there for us. And then like community is our big one, where we want to feel like it's a lonely process to study for the MCAT. You're here and you're part of this community and you're connected to a larger group that's supporting and encouraging you along the way. So those pieces are three of our big values. Then we have kind of smaller values as we go. And so making sure that, for example, group courses developed because I wanted to make a more community feel to the Brem Method. I was doing one-on-one tutoring, which was great, but it was still lonely for my students. So I built a group course that connected to community. It also made us more profitable, but it's because we were in alignment with our values and with what our students wanted.
Yes. Gosh, Joe, I love those insights from you because listeners, values aren't just about having fancy words on a marketing brochure. You see how this actually drives Amanda's real life business decisions, which in turn does more good for more people. So, and along the lines, I'm going to throw this in there for a lot of people who thinks that profit is separate from all that. All of these good decisions lead inevitably to good things for your bottom line. So Amanda, I love these insights. I know that this is going to be one of those episodes where listeners are just like, we want more wisdom, and we're going to talk about where they can go more to learn more about your business. But first things first, I always love asking this question at the end of our episodes because I have no idea where guests are going to take it. What's your one piece of advice for entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs all over the world who are tuning in here? There's so much good stuff, really meaningful, important stuff that we talked about here today. But with that entrepreneurial hat on, what's the takeaway you hope everyone gets?
I think my biggest takeaway is when you find, for me at least, I became an entrepreneur because I found what I loved and I wanted to do it in a way that nobody else was doing. And as a result, that made me successful. So I would say, like, if what you're considering is like, oh, I'd love to be an entrepreneur, my takeaway is find what you love that you want to do in a way that's different from what's out there and will provide a value that's not there, and just lean into that and expect all the skill. Like, you'll learn how to be an entrepreneur as you go. It's more about finding the thing that you can provide uniquely to the world that nobody else can because you care about it the most and you want to provide it. And I think that's all it is. And then the entrepreneurship, you learn as you go. You kind of build the airplane as you're falling.
Yes, gosh, amen to that advice. It's true. I always think about riding a bike. We could read about riding a bike. We could watch YouTube videos about riding a bike. The only way to learn how to ride a bike is to put your butt in that seat. So I absolutely love that advice. Really inspiring words for all of our listeners, no matter where we are in our journeys. Along those lines, Amanda, I know they're going to be keen. We talked so much about the Brem Method, all the great things that you're doing on YouTube and beyond. Drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
So my website is www.bremmethod.com. That has kind of all the things that I do and my team in terms of what we provide to students. And then I am going to heavily pitch my YouTube channel, which is just at Brem Method. And you can kind of see what I've been working on there. And I would love a subscribe because we are actively trying to get it out to more students.
Yes, listeners, you already know the drill. Scroll right on down wherever it is that you're tuning into today's episode, and you'll find the links to Amanda's business website, which is bremmethod.com. There's 2 M's in there, so it's Brem and then method.com. We're also linking directly to her YouTube channel, and we're also linking to her personal LinkedIn if you want to reach out and say thank you for all of her generosity in sharing her knowledge, experiences, wisdom with us here today. And Amanda, on that note, from myself and all the listeners, thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
It was a pleasure to be here.